I'm Scott. I'm on the Biomes Committee. That's why I'm up here. If you're interested in helping plan the speaker series, join Biomes, talk to Kag, myself, Christy, and we'll get you started. All right. So I have the honor of introducing Rebecca Sullivan today. She's currently a Yale World Fellow. She graduated she got a master's from the Royal Agricultural College in 2010, and since then she's been working and advocating for the importance of sustainable living, publishing many books on the topic, as you can see, and like The Art of the Natural Home, something she lives every day in her straw bale off-grid home in southern Australia. In addition to her work on sustainable living, she has founded two social enterprises, Warndu and the Granny Skills Movement. Yep. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Firstly, thank you to Melanie for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure to be in this very beautiful building that holds some very, very important conversations, important lectures. This school is, without a doubt, the most important school. My country is burning at the moment. Has anyone been reading about the Australian bushfires? To put it into perspective, the Amazon, when it was on fire, recently 125,000 hectares was burned. Currently, 970,000 hectares have been burned in Australia. The fires are still going. We have 67 fires raging completely out of control, some of which are very close to my home at the moment. Lots of my friends and family have lost homes. Lots of our native animals have perished, and it's a really, really difficult time at the moment. In the world, Canada's melting. It's freezing here already. I'm sure it probably does get very cold here, but it feels quite random that it's cold still in autumn. Those fires that are raging, it's not even summer in Australia yet. And in autumn, before I came here, autumn Australia, so in April, I had a huge fire nearly take my house, and that was in autumn. So the work that I do, the work that you're all doing is very, very important. So my name's Rebecca Sullivan. I'm from South Australia. Has anyone been to South Australia? One person? Excellent. Anyone been to Australia? Excellent, that's great. Some people. So I'm a Yale World Fellow, which is a real honour. I get to be here for the whole fall semester. And during that time, we get to share our work. We get to learn from other amazing people. We mentor students, and we run events and do talks. So today I'm here to talk about my work. I'm here to talk about what I like to call aha moments. Has anyone had an aha moment? Come on, you've all had aha moments. They might be personal, they might be professional, but before we do that, I just want to take you to my home. I want to set the scene. So I gave you a random leaf. I'd love you to grab that leaf. I know I'm a little bit of a bioterrorist bringing these in from Australia. Don't tell anyone. I want you to grab that leaf and I want you to squish it, and then I want you to close your eyes and smell it. Really smell it. Does anyone want to guess what that leaf might be? What family it might come from? So this is my home. I wanted you to smell this because this is my home. This is what I get to smell every day of my life. So it's called strawberry gum. Can anyone now smell the strawberry? So it's a native Australian gum, so it's part of the eucalyptus family, and it's actually one of the oldest protectants of our microbiome. So all the scientific evidence today says that this is one of the greatest protectants of our microflora on the planet. If you were to go back 100,000 years and speak to an Indigenous person, they would tell you exactly the same thing, just not in the same language. So I'll get to that part of my work later, but I just wanted to really set the scene of my home, how lucky I am and how grateful I am to live in a forest, a small native forest. It's only 90 acres, but I get to wake up to that every day. But going back to aha moments, they happen. Sometimes you don't realise they're an aha moment until much later. But for me, my giant aha moment all started with this cake. I'll come back to the cake later. Before that, there was lots of work that led to my mission, and I didn't really realise that cake was an aha moment until a bit later. But So to set some context, I, like most Australians, went on a holiday to London for 6 weeks when I was 21, and I ended up staying there for 10 years. It's a very Australian thing to do. We live very far away from the rest of the world, so we feel it's our duty to go and leave the country and go as far away as we possibly can. My first actual job in London was, I worked for a really terrible PR company. I'd studied journalism. I didn't go to university straight out of school. I struggled with school. I didn't think university was for me, so I went and did just a private course in journalism for 2 years. So I got this awful PR job, and I worked with these very, very, very posh English ladies who didn't really like the way I dressed or the way I spoke too much. And I'd worked on this bike race called the Tour Down Under. I did some work experience with this big event company in Australia called Australian Major Events. And I worked on this bike race, so I worked on this bike race for a week. I heard that the Tour of Britain was being reinvented. This sounds completely irrelevant to what I'm going to be talking to you about, but it's an aha moment, so it's important and it's key to my story. So I rang this race, and the boss of the race picks up. So the Tour of Britain is like the Tour de France, but in Britain, in the UK. And I said, I just wonder if you have any work. And he said, and who are you? And I explained to him that I'd done some work experience on the Tour Down Under, the Australian version. And he kind of went, no. And I went, I was really shocked because I was very used to, by that point, asking for work experience or asking for work and people going, okay, you're brave enough to call, come on in. The Brits don't work quite the same as the Australians. And so eventually I rang him every day until he finally just said, look, just come in for a week's work experience and, we'll see what happens. And so I thought, okay, so I went and approached my PR boss, told her I've got this great opportunity, and she's like, you work in travel PR, how is a bike race even close? I said, I really want to do it, I think it would be a great experience. And so anyway, she fired me, and I went and worked on this bike race, and I must have done something right because they actually fired the PR manager and gave me his job. So I spent the next 3 years completely out of my depth as a naive 23-year-old Australian, working with some of the biggest stakeholders in the UK, Transport for London, the Mayor's Office, Visit Scotland. This is a rolling bike race that goes all the way around the UK. I'm dealing with people that have 40 years experience on me. But I learned to fail, pick myself up, and keep going. And in that time, I was asked to be a press officer for one of the pro teams. So this new team was being started, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. So I went along with this bloke named John and set up this professional team that ended up racing in the Tour de France for 5 years. But during that time, I spent so much time in Italy that I fell completely and utterly in love with food. Now, it's an important side note here that I grew up in a family of eaters. Who comes from a family of eaters? Almost everyone. Meaning every celebration was always around a table, always loud, always lots of food. But although I grew up in a very small country town that was surrounded by wheat and sheep and food, I could never have told you where that food came from. So it wasn't until I spent all this time in Italy that I started to become obsessed with food, not just because I enjoyed eating, but because everything that was presented on my plate had a story, and it came from down the road, and it was always in season, and I was just blown away by this particular nonna who used to cook for us 3 times a day. And I found that I became more and more obsessed with sneaking into her kitchen and trying to learn about the food than I cared more about my boys actually winning bike races. So my first aha moment was a bit like this. We finished the Giro d'Italia, which is like the Tour de France, and we're all sitting at this huge long table. It was a beautiful summer's evening. It was 60 people, and they were from all different cultures and nationalities. Hardly anyone could speak the same language, but there was food and there was alcohol, of course. But we were having a wonderful time. It was this 10-course feast that had been thrown together by someone's nonnas, aunties, uncles, dogs, cousins, cats, mums. From nowhere, this feast was sort of presented. And we got to the 10th course, and it was pretty late by then. I'm not going to lie, a lot of wine had been consumed at this point. And we're sitting at this table, And it was just like a Hollywood movie. So we're sitting there, this cheese is put in front of me, and I'm looking at this cheese and I'm thinking, whew, something's going on here. Maybe I've had too much to drink. And I sort of tap the bloke next to me. I'm like, there's something moving in my cheese. He's like, of course there is. It's maggots. It's kazumazu. And I'm like, I'm not eating that shit. So loud. It's like a spotlight comes down on me. The whole room goes quiet and you can hear a pin drop. So you've gone from this loud party to like this obnoxious, loudmouth, naive Australian just basically offending everyone. So everyone's staring at me and I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? So I pick up this cheese and I put it in my mouth, so scared, and it just blew my mind. It was the most delicious thing I've ever eaten, still to this day. And so has anyone heard of kazumazu before? I'm butchering the Italian language by my pronunciation. Anyway, it's a traditional Sardinian cheese that has been passed down for centuries. So I realised in that moment, not until later of course, that I'd offended an entire culture about something that was part of their tradition for so many generations. So this cheese is now black market and you can't buy it. It's only done through families. It's always hidden in cellars. And this amazing cheese had so much story connected to it and so much history. And I'd offended, this entire room, basically, of Italians who have been eating this since they were old enough to eat cheese. And looking back on that moment, that was definitely... That next day, I quit my job, I went back to London, and I joined the slow food movement. Does anyone know what the slow food movement is? For those of you that don't, it was founded in the 80s by a journalist named Carlo Petrini. Now, Carlo Petrini was a very, very passionate food writer. And he came back to Italy after travelling, and a McDonald's had been built near the Spanish Steps, and he was outraged to think that a place where he lived that was all about food had got this sort of fast food chain built there. So he founded this movement that effectively champions good, clean and fair food. And it's been around since the 80s. It's now in 134 countries. And small movements are founded, so you form your own slow food group. And from there you hold events and activities and protect food. And good meaning tastes good, clean meaning produced clean to the environment, and fair meaning everyone in the food chain is paid properly. So I was very quickly made the youth ambassador for slow food in the UK, mainly because my ability to protest very loudly was high, and I was very happy to be thrown in prison on behalf of farmers and farmers' rights. I spent a good 3 years working in and around the slow food movement. And then from there, I started to do sort of really amazing jobs. So along the way, leading to this sort of granny skills aha moment, I've worked for the FAO. I got this really amazing opportunity after I did the environmental leadership program at Berkeley in California to work for the FAO, briefly teaching climate change scientists how to speak in layman's terms. We all know scientists are amazing and their research is very important, but sometimes they can't quite communicate it to the general public. And the general public, when it comes to climate change, are the ones that need to act as much. I was the first non-engineer to volunteer for Engineers Without Borders, and I spent 4 months in a very small town in rural Uganda called Nakokonjeru. I ran this sustainable coffee project that was very, very closely linked to a microfinance project that UC Davis were doing. And without sounding cliche, it was the most incredible time of my life. I got to work with amazing people. I lived completely off the grid. I had no toilet, no running water, no power, anything like that for the 4 months that I lived there. And I think, that really cemented this absolute desire for me to work in the environmental sector through what I did with food. My big 2 food jobs, in 2008 I founded the Real Food Festival in London, which was a bit like the Slow Food, to go back to Slow Food, has this huge festival every year in Turin called Salone del Gusto. And hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world embark on Turin to eat amazing, ethically produced food for 3 days. So we wanted to replicate that event in London, which we did by having 450 small producers subsidised to be there. And then I was really lucky. I got to go and work in San Francisco on Slow Food Nation in 2008. Is anyone from California? Do you remember Slow Food Nation? So I got to work with Alice Waters. I got to work with Eric Schossler, Michael Pollan, Mark Bittman, Wendell Berry, all of these people who are my absolute heroes and this is back in 2008. I know it doesn't sound that far back in the past, but there was this real sort of revolution going on, both in the UK and in the US, around this slow food sort of principles. I worked in South Africa and won a BBC Media Award for a project I got to do with young kids, empowering them to tell the story of their lives. These beautiful guys as you can see in the picture, what we did is we gave them all little flip cameras and we taught them how to make a video, and they told the story of their life. These guys told the story of growing up in rubbish piles, but a superhero came and gave them all the ability to go to school. So SOS Children's Villages are homes that they have one employee, which is a mum, who's employed full-time to take care of 10 orphans, usually from the minute they come in till they can go off on their own. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful charity. It was a huge privilege to work on that project. So I've spent 15 years now working in food and sustainability. When people ask me what I do for a living, I just go, oh yeah. It's a bit like that. Ask William. He's tried to ask me to try and narrow down my work into a little bit of an elevator pitch, but I wear many hats, many hats, but always with sustainability at its core. And I've worked really, really hard I work in a world surrounded by a lot of fickle food people. And it's been sometimes quite difficult to watch people around you sell out. And I've worked really hard to keep my integrity and my authenticity in what I do, and not, not take money for posts and by any brand that sort of asks you to do it, and not fall into the bad influencer trap. I'm not saying that all influencers are bad by any means, but I'm now, since I started 15 years ago where I would write for a magazine traditionally, I'm now being forced into this sort of digital world that I really am resisting. I know its importance, but I've never stepped away from what I really care about and the core of my work, and I never will for anything. So back in 2010, I realised that I didn't know enough about food from an academic perspective, and I guess I was having FOMO that I didn't go to university when I was younger, and I didn't have an undergrad, so I thought, oh, there's no way I can go and get a master's. It's not going to happen. And I went to the Royal Agricultural College in Cirencester in the UK, had a good chat with the director and with the dean, and he said, because I was 27 at the time, I can sit an exam and write an essay based on my life experience, and I was accepted based on lived experience, which was really amazing. So my master's is in climate change and sustainable agriculture, and it was an incredible time, and we were talking about these things that are happening now all over the world back in 2010, and whilst I didn't really realise the importance of them then, I'm obviously very devastated by it all now, but being here at Yale has cemented my intention in absolutely continuing my work, but really pushing forward into the environment and climate change again, which is where I sort of started. Now, back to the cake. So, when I was living in London, my great-grandmother Lil passed away. My great-grandmother Lil was the matriarch of the family. She was 4'11", She was just absolutely had this laugh that you could hear for what felt like kilometres away. And when she passed away, my mum saved me this little box of her things because I was living overseas. I didn't get to go to the funeral. And Mum presented me with this little box, and I sort of go scurrying through this box hoping for some diamonds or an inheritance check of some description. But there was none of that. What was in there was so much greater. So there was this little stack of certificates and this copper medal, which sadly is being cut off in the photograph. But so I untie the ribbon of these certificates and I start flicking through these little certificates, and they're all handwritten. And it turned out my great-grandmother was this award-winning baker in the 30s for her Victoria sponge, this cake. And I was obviously heartbroken that I'd lost my great-grandmother, but in an instant I became even more devastated because I'd never seen her cook. So by that time, my nan had taken over the cooking in the family, and I'd never asked her anything about that. I never thought to ask her what she did when she was young, or if she loved cooking, or what. I'd heard the war stories. I remember her poem that she recited every Christmas, but I'd never asked her that. And here I am, working in food, obsessed with food, and she was this award-winning baker, and I didn't get that recipe from her. And so I thought there must be something in that. I can't be the only person that has a huge amount of regret in not spending time with their grandmothers or their grandfathers, asking those stories, writing down those recipes. And I started talking to people, and it turned out there were sort of two types of people. There was those that spent all this time on the apron strings of their grandparents. They learnt everything. They were always in their shadow. And then there were people like me who I felt like I had this extremely close relationship with my grandparents, but I didn't actually know anything about them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was always with them, but I didn't know anything, and I didn't ask questions, and it's not that I wasn't curious. I would ask all of them, annoying young kid questions, but nothing about their lives. And so with that, combined with listening to Michael Pollan talk all the time about if your grandparents don't recognise it as food, it's not food, and thinking about the fact that my grandmother is the most sustainable person I know, and not because she's a hipster. She doesn't eat locally and seasonally because she's cool. She did it out of necessity. She did it because she went through the war, she went through rations. She was poor she was so poor. Even when she was with my grandfather, they were really poor. So there was zero waste, and there's still zero waste because my nan formed a habit, a sensible habit, a common sense habit as such a young person that she would never waste any food. So I thought maybe I can create this movement that encourages us to live like our grandparents. And so that's where the Granny Skills movement was born. So that is my grandmother up there. She lives with my mum now, so I'm very grateful to have her around. And she is as frugal as it gets. So the Granny Skills movement was born out of this idea that was an aha moment, that was a problem in the world that I wanted to solve through working as a social entrepreneur. So effectively, I didn't want it to just be a nice fluffy idea. So I started a PhD. I got 2.5 years in, and then I had to make a decision because I was offered an opportunity to do some TV work around the idea. I was offered an opportunity to do a pilot and to write my first book. And I still, at that stage, was really struggling with academia. I thought I could write a PhD and still do all this work at the same time and have two different brains, which you all probably know is not possible. And so I withdrew from the PhD, but what I found out in my research was that food literacy is so low among our young kids because grandparents don't spend time in the homes anymore. They no longer move into their kids' homes. And this is happening all over the world. This is not just in Australia. They're not spending as much time, so the kids aren't being exposed to as much cooking from scratch, to learning how to sew on a button or knit a beanie, or spending time in the garage with granddad fixing things. So I did a pilot program where I placed elders from nursing homes into schools to effectively, my initial goal was to teach these kids these skills: how to pickle, how to preserve, how to ferment, all of these things you would associate as granny skills. And in the end, it turned out to be that it was more important, not more important, but the elders were getting so much out of it because these were people that were coming from nursing homes that were, I'm afraid, staring out the window most of the time, not having much interaction with family members. And during that 10-week period where they were going into schools, all of the things you can imagine happened. Morale was higher, eating was higher, they were eating more food, medications were lower, all of those positive things, because these are living libraries. These are people with skills and knowledge and stories and things that they can pass on to us, and these are all useful and all things that seem to be the things that we're losing. So this granny skills idea, I'm now writing curriculum for, I love that, I just thought I'd put that up there because I think that's brilliant. I'm writing curriculum for, I won't show you my TV stuff, that's boring. I'm writing curriculum for Australian schools, which I'm hoping, praying, will get picked up so that this granny skills program can be in schools. And it's touching on gardening and not wasting and fixing things and repurposing things and everything you can think of that your grandparents would have done. So they're my books so far to date. This is the first one, Like Grandma Used to Make. That was a collection of elder ladies' recipes. And then what happened after writing that, which was focused on food, I realised that my grandmother's skills extended so much further than food. She still cleaned with lemon and salt and bicarb, and we're being sold this sort of natural lie, for the most part, by big multinationals, and we can actually have these granny skills in our entire life. So now all of my work is around teaching people to live like their grannies, to have a natural home, that they can have control over what they're putting into their body, they can be better to the environment, they can save money, all of those things. But depending on who I'm speaking to, I'll speak to a different conversation. So if I'm speaking to a group that are really passionate about the environment, they already get that by making your own body scrub and your own deodorant, your own toothpaste is tapping into all of the things: health, packaging, less packaging, the environment, all of that sort of stuff. So depending on who I'm talking to, the takeaway message will be different to different people. This is just some more. I don't have time to show you any of this sort of stuff, any of my TV stuff, but I've done a lot of TV work, always championing this idea of living like our grandmothers. Alice Waters, my absolute hero. And then this is bringing me to my sort of last aha moment. So this is my partner, Damien. He is an Adnyamathanha man from the Flinders Ranges in South Australia, so he's Indigenous. And when I met him, I realised that I had been championing local food for my entire career, but I'd never tried anything local. And what I mean by local is I'd never tried kangaroo, I'd never heard of strawberry gum, which you all had earlier, didn't know what wattle seed was, had never heard of lemon myrtle. How can I be a local food advocate if I'd never tried anything native to my own country? So that, along with the fact that I didn't know anything about Aboriginal culture, like most Australians, there's always a big elephant in the room whereby we don't learn it in school, we don't know what the appropriate language is. There was this real awkwardness with his parents because I wanted to know everything about what they ate when they were kids. I wanted to not regret the same way I'd regretted with my grandmother in not asking them all the questions. I wanted to know, did they forage? Did they hunt? Were they farmers? I wanted to know everything, and I didn't know how to bring it up. And finally, it took me about 9 months, even maybe longer, to ask Damien's dad, please can you tell me something about what you used to eat when you were a kid? And it was like this beautiful moment of him almost cathartically just spilling, all of these stories out of him that he obviously hadn't really spoken about for a really long time. And Damien said not even to him, I mean, he grew up hearing more from his pop and his grandparents more than his dad. So his dad went through awful time when he was a little boy, when the missionaries came through and stopped him speaking language, stopped him going through initiation, stopped anything that represented his culture. And so now Damien's dad, whenever he comes down from the Flinders, he will have stopped by the side of the road, run out into a field, picked all this stuff that he remembered as a kid and brought it to us. So there's sort of two folds. That, as well as that, Damien would be asked constantly, what does your girlfriend do for a living? And he'd be like, oh, something with grannies, I don't know, like she hangs out with grannies. And then Damien's pop got dementia. And that in itself is a horrific thing to have to go through. But what happened when Damien's pop got dementia, all of those stories that were passed down orally, because in Aboriginal culture, things are not written down, all those recipes from his nan are not scribbled down in the back of a magazine like they were for me, all those stories started to stop. And so we both realised that the work I was doing with protecting culture and environment through food with granny skills had to happen with his culture, and we had to bring the two of them together. So we founded Wandu, which some of our products are sort of here on the bench. Wandu means good in Damien's language, and the reason we chose good isn't because we were promoting products that tasted good. That's part of it. We wanted to be socially good and environmentally good. So our mission statement is to regenerate, there's some of our products, regenerate culture, community, tradition, health and soil. And we chose that mission because we knew we never wanted to be stuck in a food box. We started with food because I knew food. I knew how to create products. I'd done a lot of it in the past as an absolute serial entrepreneur. And we wanted to make sure that what we did was respectful to our Indigenous elders, that promoted the amazing health benefits of these plants, and also, and probably now, 3 years in, the most important part of our mission is the soil. And I say that because without these native plants being in the soil, our soil is ruined. So we've seen mass monoculture happen in Australia. You can look at an aerial view and most of it's wheat and sheep. And we wanted to somehow, through food, through getting people to buy these products and getting people to be exposed to these products and creating a safe space for people to ask about Aboriginal culture, which is what we do through our pop-up restaurants. We're hoping to get more and more of these plants onto farmers' properties, creating a value-add proposition for other farmers and other people who are growers, encourage young farmers into the market. For the first time ever in the industry, the demand is outweighing the supply, which is awful for us because we can never get the things we want, but amazing for the industry because it means people are finally listening. And we wrote our first Native Food Cookbook, came out in April, and it's been hugely, hugely successful, which shows that finally people want to know more about our amazing Indigenous culture. These are some of my food, some of the things from my book. And to really put our money where our mouth was, I finally got to move to my straw bale home a year and a half ago. That's my home on the left. That's our pottery and art studio on the right, where it's not that green at the moment. 90 acres in the Clare Valley, surrounded by monoculture, mainly wineries, which is okay. Our entire property is permaculture designed. Our home, we don't have an air conditioner, and as an example, I had 3 weeks in February where it was above 40 degrees Celsius, so over 100 every day. We put a fan on maybe 3 times at night. We have one fireplace in the middle of our home which heats our water. All of our food compost goes into a worm composting system and out onto our orchard. And then we have 3 tree plantations of different eucalypts, which are used for eco cabins. Where our next plans for the property, we've got this amazing shack on top of the hill, another hill on our property, which looks to the ocean actually. So if anyone ever wants to come on a semi-working holiday or a writing retreat to Australia, you're welcome. You can stay in the shack. wine comes with it. But next for us, we're building a holistic food and farming school. We've got an old cottage down the bottom of our property. I teach at River Cottage in the UK, Ballymaloe, Schumacher College. I teach at all these amazing schools all over the world, and I figured it's time for me to bring all of those amazing things that I've learned and all of the amazing people that I know and bring them to Australia to try and create a school that encompasses all of our values and principles. Also, I'm having a baby, so I need to try and figure out how I can stay at home a little bit more. We're building eco-accommodation, a seed library to protect all these Indigenous plants. And then Wandu is extending into a lifestyle brand. So the plan there, I already dye eco garments. So I dye responsibly made shirts for a brand in Sydney using all of the fallen bark from our forest. The reason there's so much bark on the ground is because we've been in drought for 30 years. So I work with this brand. I tell the climate change story by dyeing with botanicals and fallen bark, and I get to tell this really important climate change story to people who are buying these garments, which will hopefully think about climate change in a different way. And we're also building a cultural awareness centre. So lots of plans for our property and for what's next. And thank you very much for having me. Sorry, I just 45 minutes, boom. I'm happy to take any questions, comments, anything like that. No question's a silly question. Anyone? Yes?
In the photo where you introduced the granny skills,
Yep.
what exactly is happening there?
Oh, we are making compost scarves. So you take a piece of silk. So when I try and run workshops, I try not to just focus on food. So it's food scraps placed on a piece of silk. We roll it up with a little bit of rust in it, and we steam it for 20 minutes, and we get these beautiful silk scarves. There's a photo of it I'm Granny Skills on Instagram if anyone wants to, or Wandu as well. There's some beautiful photos on there, but it's so easy. If you want me to send you how to do it, I can send you. So you can effectively take any natural fibre, linen, as long as it hasn't been bleached or dyed, and you can chuck all your food scraps on it, and you'll end up with a beautiful piece of art that you can wear. So, yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Yep.
It's so amazing that you've managed to do so many different things. And I was wondering what you were thinking about the idea of specializing versus staying broad.
Very good question.
It's a continuing
My
struggle
mum tells
for
me to do that all the time. I tried it a couple of times where I tried to work for corporate or whatever, and I was not great at it. I don't like alarm clocks. I don't like having to go to the same place every day, although now it's just my home, which I feel really comfortable with, and I think that's because I'm in nature and I feel like my most authentic version of myself. I'm having a bit of a breakdown while I'm here, I'm having a bit of a midlife crisis, early midlife crisis, because I'm in this amazing institution filled with people who are mainly going to go off and do one thing, and I'm with 15 other people from the rest of the world who are doing one thing and doing it really well. I'm sort of fighting my own inner demons over whether I should do that. But I think when I speak to my colleagues who are, either UN, I've always wanted to work for the UN. I've got this thing about wanting to work for the UN. But everyone that I know that works for the UN has said to me, don't, because they'll cut your wings off and you'll get caught up in the bureaucracy and you're making more change. I figure that when I run my workshops or when I get to do my sort of passionate activism work, I'm breaking habits and empowering people to go and pass on things in a way that's grassroots, and I feel like I'm making lots of change doing that, and I have to believe in that. And so now we're bringing Granny Skills, the idea of Granny Skills and Wandu together. That will be as much focus as I think I'm ever going to get. But it's a really good thing, and I torment myself with it frequently. I'm like, maybe I should just go get a real job, go get a real job. But everyone that knows me and everyone that ever comes into contact with me tells me not to, because they think I'm making change doing what I'm doing. And hopefully I am, and I'm going to continue to do so. But great question. Thanks for reminding me of going and getting a real job.
Thank
Anyone else? Yes?
promoted the idea of Hello. I'm wondering if you've promoted the idea of granny skills in countries that have more recently industrialized, like countries in Asia and South America, rather than like North America and Europe.
Really great question. And in fact, during my research, I found countries like China where elders were really present in homes. That has changed so quickly in the last 10 years. And I think it needs to be in every country somehow. Obviously, the curriculum or the idea would be different depending on what country you went to, but I think it's relevant in many parts of the world, and I would love to. If you'd like to start one somewhere, let me know. I'll share the curriculum. And I've definitely had emails from all over the world going, what can I do? How can I start? So I'm just trying to get people to start granny skills clubs at the moment, which is just getting the idea out there. And so we've got a granny skills club at a couple of nursing homes in Australia, whereby they open the nursing home up to young kids to come in and, you know, hang out in the shed and fix things with the old blokes and hang out in the kitchen with the grannies. I know it sounds completely sexist, but it's just the generation that I'm talking about. So, but yes, I hope one day, if it's in other countries, that I know that I'm succeeding and I shouldn't have got a real job. Yes, ma'am? Yep.
Are you leading any practical skills workshops in this?
I'm doing one tonight, actually, at Jackson. If you really want to come, I can probably squeeze you in. So we're just like making deodorant and toothpaste and kimchi and stuff like that. Yeah, so let me know if you want to come. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, yes?
Thank you. I really enjoyed your talk and your narrative, so thank you. I think you mentioned this idea of, like, now in the digital age, we have influencers where increasingly people's lives, the line between lives and work is getting fuzzier and fuzzier. Yeah, and I think that your very unique path that you have made for yourself in your life, your work and your life, like your life is thrust into that spotlight of your work. And I wonder if you have any thoughts over maintaining a certain balance or a separation, or whether having work and life be the same thing is really just exactly what you want?
Very good question. I think I've definitely gone through periods where I have felt like there is no separation, and that's mainly because I love food and I work with food, but also my social life always seems to contain food. Which sometimes can be a real struggle. And that's why we actually built the pottery studio, because I kept trying to go and have all these hobbies that were completely ill-related to food. And like, I started adult ballet and I left crying 3 times because I'm so unco. And I went to Spanish classes and I've got pretty terrible hearing and I couldn't hear properly and I left crying. And I kept trying to do all these things that weren't food-related and always left crying. And then I did pottery and I was great at it. And I was like, yes, and I'm making plates, so they're still food related. But I take social media breaks frequently. I have learnt to... I used to get really angry when I'd see people I know in my industry, you know, taking money from our terrible, awful supermarkets who are the devil, you know, just because... And they all claim to be, you know, in the sustainable realm. I was offered $100,000 from a supermarket to be the face of them, and I said no. I mean, I should have financially. I should take it. I'm always poor, but I'm really comfortable in. I sleep better at night having integrity versus having money. But yes, I struggle. I struggle, you know, often as anyone does. You know, social media is crazy, but I don't have any apps on my phone, so I don't sit there and mindlessly scroll. I try not to get too bogged down in it, but I take breaks, and I think the breaks help. And I surround myself with people who are doing amazing things. And the influencer sphere, I don't know, I feel like it's going to come crashing down. I think I feel the backlash. I feel the backlash in Australia. You know, I get 5 emails a week from somewhat eco brands. Here, will you use my laundry detergent? And all you have to do is post, you know, 3 photos. And I just, as a rule, just say no to all of it. I'll work as an ambassador for brands if I get to work with a brand, and I mean properly work with a brand and really know that the brand is legit and understand more about it. But it's really hard because my work is in public. There's no real defined line as to what my work is either. I do a bit of everything, but definitely being here has made me think that I don't want to do as much in that. I don't want to keep going and doing demos at big food festivals where everyone's drunk and just throwing away plastic and all that sort of stuff. You know, I don't want to work with those kind of people anymore. I want to really focus on how I make these two brands make positive change. But if you've got any ideas, please, please let me know because it's really hard. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, everyone. If anyone wants to have a look at books or take photos of recipes or anything, please come up. I can stick around for as long as you need. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Cheers. Are you going to the environmental conference on Friday? Yeah, I've been up and down to the farm and in touch with them and all that stuff. Yeah, I remember. Oh, you're going to remind me that tomorrow? Yeah, that'd be great. so I don't have to think about it, and I can focus on, you know, one thing, and that's like a gentleman's question. It's like, you know, no, I'm pregnant. I'm just in a job that just pays me money, and I don't have to worry about it. But what does that look like? You know? What does that look like that I still give a shit about working? You know? So this time, I really just